Okay, I have 5 o'clock. We'll get started. Good evening. The City of Fort Lauderdale Historic Preservation Board will be conducting this meeting in a virtual format, and the public can view a live stream of this meeting at www.fortlauderdale.gov/FLTV. Any member of the public that is interested in speaking before the HPB virtually is required to complete the virtual speaker card on the city's website at www.fortlauderdale.gov/government/HPB. If you have trouble signing up, please email planning@fortlauderdale.gov or call 954-828-5265. Please provide your name and address, and if you cannot be identified, you will not be provided access to the meeting. Participants, please remember to mute yourself if you are not speaking and silence any other devices and speakers so we do not hear interference. I'll now turn it over to the chair to start the meeting.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'd like to call the meeting to order. It is now 5:01 p.m. And Trisha, I gather we do not have any minutes because this is a special meeting just to deal with the Sailboat Bend Historic District.
That's correct.
So how do we proceed with the meeting?
So we'll go ahead and we can do the Pledge of Allegiance, and then we'll do the swearing in, and then I'll proceed with my presentation.
So we'll begin with the Pledge of Allegiance.
Correct. So if everyone will stand and we'll start. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
And Trish, may I ask a question, please, Trish?
Sure.
And Shari, City Attorney, may have to come in on this. I'm just trying to understand the format that we're going to work in tonight so that it doesn't go off into a lot of different areas. Is our mission tonight to hear from Sailboat Bend and their desire to rescind the historic district that's been assigned to them? Is that our mission?
Tonight, we're having a discussion on the proposed updates to the Sailboat Bend Historic District based on the architectural resource survey of the district that was conducted. So that includes the review of the proposal for assigning contributing and non-contributing status, but primarily focusing on the proposed ULDR updates. So after we swear in the public, I'll provide a presentation, and we'll go over a brief overview of what we covered a couple of months ago at the November 2nd meeting. And then I'll go through the various changes that are proposed to the ULDR. And at that time, we can have a board discussion. And following the board discussion, we can have public comment.
Then my last comment would be that when it does come to public comment, is it out of order to only include those people who own property in Sailboat Bend that are going to be affected by this overlay historical change and whatever it may be? We could be listening to a lot of people who are passionate and have opinions about it, but the people who own the property there are the ones that are affected by this. And I'm just trying to keep it neat.
Tim, we can't limit any of the public from speaking, so it can be anyone that actually makes a public comment on this.
Okay, I thought I'd ask, that's all.
Right. The issue of rescinding the designation is not before you tonight. In fact, tonight there will be no voting of any issues. There's just going to be a presentation and discussion and subsequently a comment. But afterwards, when we have our regular meeting, there will be voting.
Okay, thank you.
City Moderator, could we move Richard Rosa over to a panelist? Thank you.
So are we ready to swear in everyone? Or we did already, I'm sorry.
No, I haven't sworn in everyone yet. City moderator, can you please unmute the attendees that that have signed up to speak? Please raise your right hand if you are going to speak to the board tonight. Do you swear or affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Please answer. City moderator, were they unmuted?
Yes.
Okay, I'll repeat. Do you swear or affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Could you please answer if you wish to speak to the board tonight?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
So with that, Trisha, who maintains the list and the order of people speaking, but you're going to make a presentation first, correct?
Correct. We'll do the presentation and discussion, and then following that, Yvonne Redding, who's joining us from staff, she will be assisting and announcing who's signed up to speak. Okay.
Great.
All right. So is everyone okay with me proceeding and starting the presentation?
Yes.
All right. Give me 1 second. Just pull it up here. Can everybody see that?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Okay, good evening, everyone. Chair and members of the board. I'm Trisha Logan, Historic Preservation Planner in the Department of Sustainable Development. And on tonight's agenda for this special historic preservation meeting is a discussion of the most recent architectural resource survey of the Sailboat Bend Historic District, which was designated as a historic district by the City Commission in 1992. And we'll also cover the proposed updates to its ordinance. The survey was conducted as part of an overall effort to make updates to the historic preservation program, and this was directed by the City Commission. Several updates to the main historic preservation ordinance have already been adopted, and that includes efforts that we had to streamline the application process for a certificate of appropriateness, including additional items that may be reviewed at staff level and additional historic preservation incentives. It's typical to reassess your historic district periodically, usually every 10 years, to maintain an inventory of designated historic resources. And this is also something that's encouraged and required by the designation of the City of Fort Lauderdale as a certified local government. Oh, missed one. Okay, on the screen you can see the 3 objectives that were initially proposed as part of this effort. And at the November 2nd HPB meeting, I provided an in-depth overview of this initiative. And today I'll provide a brief overview of the findings of the survey, including a summary of the historic context, the identified periods of significance, and then a snapshot of the buildings that were identified as part of the survey as contributing and non-contributing within the district. The remainder of the presentation will primarily include a comparison between the different aspects of the proposed updates to the OLDR and those that actually exist currently today. And at that time, the board can have a discussion of those different topics. So this is a repeat slide from the last time we met. This is an overview of the historic context, which is a framework that is developed that links the historic properties to historic trends that occurred over periods of time. And the Sailboat Bend Historic District has significance in its association with early community planning and development, its social history, and its relationship to the founding and development of the City of Fort Lauderdale. Within the original designation of the Sailboat Bend Historic District in 1991, there were several trends and patterns that were noted. One was that the structures built prior to 1940 were the most significant to the district, as their numbers had vastly declined and they represented the city's earliest pioneering communities or families. And that if a structure was built in the decades after the period of significance, specifically in the 1940s and 50s, and had an appearance of the earlier period of significance, it could be considered significant. and that the district illustrated an evolution of the city, beginning from its early 1920s examples through the mid-century modernisms of the 1950s and 60s. The basis of historic significance of the designated historic district remains the same as originally intended within this update to the survey. And outlined in the survey report is the statement of significance. The Sailboat Bend Historic District is the largest surviving district to reflect the evolving history of the city of Fort Lauderdale. And in the 1991 survey, buildings dated from 1940 or older met the cutoff established by the 50-year guideline, which is a standard that is set through the National Register and carried over in our local ordinance, where any building that is not over 50 years in age must be considered exceptional. And as the city has continued to grow throughout time and now reflecting on the current trends in the 21st century, the 50-year guideline has been moved forward in time so that buildings constructed from 1970 or earlier were evaluated as part of the survey for their ability to convey their architectural style and the then current trends. And with the addition of any of these buildings, and taking into consideration of their ability to convey the historic context of the district, the overall period of significance moved slightly forward. And within the survey, it has been identified between 1910 and 1961. And there's 3 different periods of significance that are outlined within the report. So the pre-development phase, which is prior to the 19th century, would focus on the archaeologically significant zones and properties within that area. And then the pioneer settlement are properties that were constructed between 1910 and 1944. And then the post-war would be 1945 to 61. Within the report, the history of the district and its relationship to the development of the city is fully expanded on. And just to give a snapshot of the findings of the survey, on this slide is a pie chart and a map showing the composition of the contributing and non-contributing properties within the historic district as identified within this survey, which took into account a total of 458 properties. Some of those were combined, like in the case of the village of Sailboat Bend, where those properties were combined as one parcel rather than the individual units. And now I'll move on into the ordinance updates. And it's my intent that this can be a discussion amongst the board. The first portion of the first few slides in this section will focus on the updates to the process, and then I'll go through the material and design guidelines section. So within the process section, several things were addressed, mostly to coincide with the updates that were approved last year to help streamline the certificate of appropriateness application process and to allow staff to conduct more reviews at staff level rather than going through the board process. And this particularly takes into account properties that would be identified as non-contributing through the survey. So this is a chart that shows kind of our existing regulations, what the process would look like for the contributing buildings, and what the process looks like for non-contributing properties. So we have 3 different avenues that an application could go through. We have the administrative approval, which is a staff approval that can be done as part of the permitting process. And then we have a 15-day administrative approval, and those are the applications that you see periodically with requests that are beyond administrative level, but potentially could fit within the administrative level if it's not affecting the architectural integrity of the building, or it's meeting those material and design guidelines that are already existing. And then of course we have the Historic Preservation Board process for the major alterations demolition, new construction, things like that. So this breaks it down as far as what changes between our existing regulations and the proposed. And as you can see, there's a couple of instances that do change for the 15-day administrative process for non-contributing buildings if they are undergoing an alteration. And then also with the solar panels, any solar panels that are proposed, those could go through a 15-day administrative review process rather than going to the Historic Preservation Board for that request. Does the board have any questions on this?
None. I don't have any questions.
Okay.
You're not actually running your PowerPoint, are you?
Can you see it?
I mean, you didn't start with from the beginning, did you? And it should be bigger.
Oh, is it not working?
We're looking at the whole PowerPoint.
Oh, okay.
No, it's okay. I mean,
Sorry.
Yeah.
Okay. No, I'll make it bigger. I don't know why it's doing
well,
that.
if you start with if you go to the slideshow and go from the beginning, then it should be bigger. There we go. Is that right?
I think it's, sorry about that.
You need to go to the slideshow.
Trisha, right,
Yeah.
hit slideshow and then hit current slide.
Yeah. It's just that it makes your charts so small we can't see them.
Gotcha. Okay. Yeah, I think I'm having an issue because I have multiple screens.
Oh, okay.
So give me 1 second and I'll
resolve it. Don't worry about it. Just put it back to the right.
hold on 1 second. All right. Maybe this is better.
Definitely. Thank you.
All right. Thanks for letting me know.
Oh, it's okay.
All right. So, okay. So this is the slide we left off on. And then just as a few other examples for new construction and demolition, where the process would change is in a couple of instances for non-contributing buildings under the 15-day administrative approval for smaller additions or alterations. And then moving into the material and design guidelines section, there's a few things overall that took place as part of this proposed update. One is to actually remove the material and design guidelines from the Sailboat Bend Historic District section and then insert 2 new sections, one for the design standards for buildings and then one for the site design standards. So that would include fencing and paving, driveways, things like that. So the following pages do provide a comparison between the material and design guidelines as it exists today and the proposed updates. Each of the comparisons has an indicator for how the level of change that was completed for each proposed update. So you can see if it's red, then it would be more restrictive and then goes down the line as far as if it's equal to what we have today or less restrictive. And then there are 2 other indicators that you can see. One is purple if it's based on our design guidelines for the city as a whole. And those are our visual historic preservation design guidelines that are available online. And then turquoise would indicate that it's based on our neighborhood design criteria revisions, which are another section within the code and is primarily used for new construction projects for duplexes, townhouses, cluster developments, and things like that. So we'll start with this first section, which is exterior building walls. And it's pretty straightforward for this section. You can see that. Go ahead.
Before we go on, I had a general question.
Sure.
Before you get into specifics. Over the past several years, we've talked about trying to take some of the responsibilities that the board decides and allow staff to do it, windows in the back of a lot or things like that. Has anything been done to that effect?
Yes, so last year, the board approved updates, and they were ultimately approved by the city commission that do allow for staff to handle some changes administratively. So if there's alterations that aren't visible from the right-of-way, those can be handled at an administrative level. If there's a minor demolition or a minor alteration for an addition on the rear of the structure, there's certain parameters that have been put in place as far as what staff can or cannot do at an administrative level. So if someone came in with a proposed addition that was less than 25% of the total square footage of the existing house and it's not visible from the right-of-way, then that's something that could be handled at staff level. If it is visible from the right-of-way or to the front or with an alteration or something, then that would have to go to the Historic Preservation Board.
Thank you.
Sure. Any other questions at this time? All right. Don't see any hands. Okay, so like I was saying with this section, with the exterior wall materials, not much changed. So you can see that with the yellow, that's equal to what we have in the existing ordinance. And then with the green section, it's slightly less restrictive for non-contributing buildings or for new construction within the district to use the synthetic siding material. Okay.
But the board can make the final decision if it's the synthetic material or whatever. I'm just thinking that sometimes the synthetic wears better than the real thing. But anyway.
Yeah. So if a contributing building wanted to come in with a request to use the synthetic siding, then that's something under this proposed ordinance, the way it's written, they would have to go to the board to make that request. It's not something that staff could approve at an administrative level.
Thanks.
Mm-hmm. So this section is related to windows and front entry doors. And again, you can see where things have changed the most. You have certain things that are the same as what the existing is. Something that comes up pretty regularly is the horizontal sliding windows. And that's something in our existing material and design guidelines, which isn't allowed from the front facade. And typically the way it's been perceived in the past is that it's also not allowed if it's visible from the right-of-way. And then we also have the glass being transparent. That's something that is within our historic preservation design guidelines. It's also stated within the material and design guidelines. And then something that we repeatedly talk about is the muttons having a raised profile, specifying the materials for windows and having them be aluminum or steel. We haven't allowed vinyl windows in the past on a regular basis, and that's something that a property owner has had to go to the board for. And then for front entrances on new construction, just making sure that they would face the primary street frontage and utilize a door that's appropriate to the style of the structure. This is something that comes from our historic preservation design guidelines. And then accordion shutters, it actually becomes less restrictive, where you currently can't have them at all, but you could have them if it's not visible from the right-of-way in this section, and you can have it at a review at staff level. Does anyone have any questions or comments on this section? I don't see anyone's hands, but feel free to chime in. The next section is on garages, carports, and accessory or secondary structures. So you can see again where the code is more or less restrictive. With the location of the garage doors, this is something that's in the neighborhood design criteria revisions. Having it set back, the garage door set back 2 feet from the primary facade. This is really going to primarily relate to new construction, but if someone wanted to come in and do an addition to the garage as a garage to their existing home, it would also apply. There's also the size of the garage doors. This is similar to what is existing in the regulations today. Today, there is a 9 feet maximum width that's allowed. And then garage door materials, this is something that is new, so it's more restrictive, but it's something that in looking in other ordinances that are used throughout the country, it's something that is put in place as a parameter. And then the rest of the items do come from the historic preservation design guidelines with the limitation of not having 2-car garage doors facing the front, carports that are located in the front of the property, or accessory structures also located in the front of the property, that they would need to be located to the rear of the primary structure. Does anyone have any questions on this section?
I do, Trisha.
Sure.
I'm not sure what that means in item C of the proposed ordinance there. Glazing would be a maximum. My screen is somewhat cut off, but I believe it says 30%.
Okay. Correct.
So let's
Yep.
just express what that means in layman's
Yep.
terms. Does that mean the garage door can't be painted in totality? What does that mean?
No, it's glass. So glazing meaning the amount of glass that's on a garage door.
Got it. Okay. And what would a stand, just so I can put it in perspective, if you have I'm going to call it a standard garage door, the garage door I'm thinking of with the small glass panels on the top, what would that allocate as a percentage of what that would be glazed for? Just
it would most likely be less than 30%. It's not 1/3 of the garage door. In that case, it's more like maybe less than a quarter.
So what we're thinking of here is not allowing more of your modern type of door that you'd see with, like, I'm going to call it almost like a mutton or a breakup panel that would essentially be in some way see-through. That's the door we're looking to keep
Correct.
out. Okay. All right. Understood. Thanks.
And this, that would be something that for sure at staff level, we couldn't be able to approve.
Got it.
Anything else? All right. Move to the next section. This is roof materials, roof configuration, solar panels, and roof appurtenances. And so a lot of this stays the same or becomes less restrictive. And you can see, as I mentioned before, with the solar panels, that's something that we could handle at either administratively or through that 15-day administrative approval process. And then with non-contributing properties, the ability to replace the roofing material becomes less restrictive, but with contributing properties, it's still the same as we conduct today, where if you want to replace it in kind, we can do that administratively. Or if we have documentation on a material that existed in the past, we can do that administratively. But if it's a completely new material that we don't have any historic documentation on, then that's not something we would be able to approve administratively. Does that make sense?
Trisha, I have a question.
Yeah.
For a contributing property, if the applicant wanted to place standing seam metal roof on the property, that could not be approved. That would have to come to the board. Is that correct?
For a contributing property, if we don't have any historic documentation on that, having a metal roof in the past, then that's not something that staff could be approving at an administrative level. So that's right.
Understood. Okay.
But if it's a non-contributing property, then it could be done at staff level.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions on the roofs before I move on? Okay. This next section is on the fences, gates, walls, piers, and hedges. And I'll go to the next slide to look at the enlarged table. But what primarily changed here is just an outline of the dimensional standards. Most of the other things stayed the same, including the prohibition of the vinyl and chain link fences. So we'll go to the next slide, which shows the actual height limitations, and this does become less restrictive from how we review fences today, where we do limit the height of a fence in the front yard to 3 feet with 30% visibility. And with this update, it's proposing the height to increase for a fence to 4 feet in height, still with 30% visibility on the front of a property. Gates can be a little bit higher at 4 feet 8 inches, and then you can go down the list. And then on the sides that are parallel to the facade, that's limited to a height of 6 feet. Along the rear, it's 6 feet. And then sides that are in front of a facade are limited to 4 feet. So it's the same as the front property line, it would be limited to 4 feet. This also proposes that sides that are facing a right-of-way would also be limited to 4 feet. So that would be an instance where you might have a corner lot. Any fence that's running in front of the actual structure would be limited to that height. Does anyone have any comments on this section? No? All right, move on. This next section is on outbuildings, number 4. And for this section, we're actually referring to the exterior wall materials and finishes. So the information that was contained in the existing material and design guidelines has been moved into the initial section that we looked at. Same for arcades and porches. Most of that information was really talking about overall materials that could be used in the historic district.
Trisha, it's Arthur.
Yes.
One more question. What do you mean by outbuildings?
So any, well, this was from the existing ordinance, but it's meant as like an accessory building.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So why don't you call it accessory building?
So it's in the current ordinance. It's
Okay.
referenced that way in the current
Sure.
ordinance, not in the update. So there's several changes like that, just bringing it in line with our existing language within and throughout the ULDR, such as that. Okay, so then there are 3 new sections that are proposed in the ordinance that are based on the existing H1 historic district section, the historic preservation design guidelines, and then again, the neighborhood design criteria revisions, as well as the master plan. So the first section that's sort of new is the section on the sign regulations for historic districts. Within the H1 section, there's some description of limitations on signs for commercial properties, but this combines that section into our regular sign code and provides additional definitions and allowances for number of, and types of signs, as well as the ability to retain, restore, or reconstruct historic signs, which isn't a possibility today. This is included because it will affect commercial properties within the Sailboat Bend Historic District, but it does provide an overall sign ordinance that addresses signs for any historic property within the city. And then the other section that was included, there are 2 other sections, one on driveways, paving, and parking, and then another section that's specific to new construction along the commercial corridors. So for the driveways, paving, and parking, I took a screenshot of the language. I thought it might be a little easier just to reference. So there's some limitations for the amount of paving that you would be able to have in your front yard, and a minimum amount of separation between driveways if there's multiple driveways on the site. Also talking about back out parking spaces, this would primarily be related to properties that are new construction, not to compel any current property to change their parking configuration. There's also statements in here for new driveways shall not obstruct the principal structure on the property, and then guidance for walkways and, like I said, limitation of the amount of paving in the front yard to 50%. And then, any questions on that section?
Why are all those passages underlined?
Because they're new.
Okay.
So since it's new language within the proposed updates to the ordinance, they're underlined.
Mhm.
And then this section is related to the additional design guidelines for properties that front Broward Boulevard and Southwest 7th Avenue. So there's specific language about new construction, and the dimensional requirements, the orientation of the properties, and just helping to guide the overall scale and massing of new construction in those areas. And some of this is taken from the downtown master plan updates that were recently passed. And again, this is parking, paving, and vehicular entrances specific to the commercial properties. It would not apply to properties that are not located directly on Broward Boulevard or Southwest 7th Avenue. So just guiding that new development, any new development that would occur in those locations. And there's one mention of exterior lighting. Any questions on this section?
So none of this was in the earlier outline.
It's not in the existing ordinance.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's just in the proposed updates. Okay, and then just to give a snapshot of where we go from here, we did have this information posted on our website since late August, and we had a public comment period open until October 25th and collected public comments. Those were included in your packets. It's one of the links for the exhibits, and you did receive a few additional letters and comments over the last few days that have come in. And then our next step would be to come to the Historic Preservation Board with an actual item on the agenda for consideration and for voting to make a recommendation to the City Commission. Since this item is also a historic district, it also needs to go to Planning and Zoning Board for their consideration and a recommendation to the City Commission as well. And then it would ultimately go to the City Commission for 2 readings because it's an ordinance. So this is just a rough estimate. We don't have specific dates necessarily. So that's the end of my presentation. We can go back to any slides as part of a discussion, but I'll leave it up to you.
Great, thank you. So now we have, does the board have any comments or questions on this material?
I have a comment. I'm just still a little confused. I was under the impression that this entire night was going to be dedicated to the Sailboat Bend rescinding their historic designation.
That's
That was
not
what I thought we decided to do a month ago.
No.
Am I wrong there?
I was under the same impression,
Tim, that's not what has been presented by the city, unfortunately, you know.
Tim, I took away the same idea that maybe, I don't know where the confusion lied. Maybe it was in the communication we last had just in our dialogue, but that was the same position I took away from calling a special set meeting, and maybe it was an oversight by both of us there, but that's what I understood as well.
Yeah, and believe me, I respect all this work that Trisha does, and everything that's been presented is important. But here we are, quarter to the hour, and last time we met, we were about the same time, and we felt that this was important enough to dedicate a whole meeting specifically to this association's concerns and start a dialogue, not to come to any conclusions necessarily, but to move forward on it. And that's where I'm just kind of confused.
My understanding was that this meeting was scheduled so that we could understand the new criteria, the new ideas for how we handle the issues that Trisha's outlined. I was startled to see that people were thinking that this was a session for rescinding the historical designation of Sailboat Bend.
And I also was with Barbara in terms of my understanding. But in answer to your question, Tim, my conversations with Trisha earlier indicated that there are processes for the rescission of the historic district, if that's what the group so wants, but that's not what this meeting is about.
Then what is this meeting about? I mean, I'm really confused now, because I had the conversation with our chair, and I mean, I'm getting up there. I'm going to be 70, but I clearly remember that we postponed. We moved this special meeting to December 21st because we wanted to discuss Sailboat Bend reversing their designation. We felt that it was important.
That wasn't my understanding at all.
I always understood it was the updates to the code that were being proposed by staff that we needed to review.
Me too.
Can we ask?
And why do we have this letter from Dave that speaks specifically to that? And why do we have this letter from this lady that speaks specifically to that?
That's why I was startled by that letter.
Why do we have that letter from Dave that at the end of his letter, the last thing he says is that his hope is that a good review and discussion results in improvement of historic ordinances and procedures. And this is from Dave, who's got 15 years in Sailboat Bend. And when we have a lady who gave us the letter, it clearly states how disappointed she is in the way things worked out. And she was on the original group that applied for historic designation and feels it went sideways. So believe me, I'm only making this point because I felt that this meeting was specifically going to address that issue. And I think it's an important issue. And if this is not the night that it's going to get done, I would ask this board to ask the city to give us another meeting where it is specifically addressed without anything else to be talked about.
Well, maybe we should first have Trisha explain what the process is, because anybody can get up and really say what they want tonight, be it on topic or not. That's really the speaker's choice. But Trisha had indicated that there is a certain process outlined in the city for something like this, which is not what we're discussing tonight, as far as my understanding went.
Right. I can't understand how anybody could have the impression you have, Tim. I understand that people wrote letters to that effect.
Well, I got the impression because it was my suggestion that we do this, ma'am. That's where I didn't guess this. I asked for it.
I'm not trying to contradict you. I'm just trying to say that my understanding of this meeting was to review the new criteria that were being proposed for the historic district.
Okay, that's fine. And we can continue to do that. And I'm all for it. I just don't want to lose sight of what the Sailboat Bend community is looking for consideration. I think they're entitled to take another look at where they stand with their historic designation. It's only fair.
This is the agenda she's showing you right now. That's
Very
what
well.
it was about.
So do we have any other comments on the changes to the code that are being proposed by staff from the board?
I have a couple. Yeah. I'm going to speak specifically to some of them, but I'll start with saying that really I was left with this very similar impression to Tim. But that aside for a moment, why is it that garages seem to be singled out where I live in Sailboat Bend, so I see it firsthand. I drive the streets every single day. I see a complete overflow of cars on the street, unlike any other neighborhood in Fort Lauderdale. Name a neighborhood, I will challenge you to find more cars on the street. And I've noticed it more as I've continued to walk it more as it's gotten nicer out. Why are we trying to limit hardscape to the extent I want to understand if it's in conformance with building code or if it's more restrictive, how much more restrictive, and why we're not allowing for new construction to then use what I would find a more aesthetically pleasing two-car garage door rather than find a way to make two single doors work. Is there something specifically that speaks to that as to why we're looking at it as a single door or bust, or if there's not some special exception, or if there's really historic guidelines from something greater than maybe what I'm not thinking of as to why we're trying to just keep that in effect? And that's a question for staff. It's a question for the board discussion. I don't know who I'm pointing that to, but I've never.
Richard, go ahead.
Trisha, answer it first.
Richard, some of this is from our existing design guidelines, our existing material and design guidelines, but it's also taking into account best practices with historic preservation and the existing conditions that are found throughout the neighborhood, primarily with the buildings that are considered significant to the district.
Right, but
Richard, I can tell you, can you hear me?
Yes,
Yeah.
I can.
Can you hear me? So I've lived in the neighborhood for about 25 years. I live in a historical home and I used to be very active. And the house on the corner we saved, there were houses or there were little apartments that they tore down right by the swing bridge that used to have carports. And it was because I guess they were built a little, maybe in 42 or something. And they're historic. They were historic. They should have been saved because they were the first carports because of the war and because people had wanted their car closer. But other than that, it was just houses. And so you didn't see the garages. And so all of a sudden, these townhomes, I was here before any of the townhomes came in that I can even remember. And all of a sudden you started seeing these townhomes built with like all you would see was like these garage doors. It looked like Weston, not that Weston is bad, but before that you saw big yards with oak trees and, you know, our historical homes. And then all of a sudden you saw more garage doors than houses. And it just totally was a shocker and changed the dynamics. I'm thinking that they probably, that sort of set the tone back in the very beginning when they started building these new townhomes. But that's just my, because I was so active and people were, you know, just getting through loopholes. I couldn't get a fence. I couldn't get a picket fence in front of my historical home, but developers were able to get through loopholes and tear homes down and build townhouses that, you know, small little, tear little houses down and build big, gigantic.
I wanted to piggyback on what you're
garage
saying,
doors.
Veronica, I wanted to piggyback on what you're saying because my experience with other cities in other historic districts is the feeling has generally been that a double car garage, as you're saying, totally changes the residential character of the neighborhood. That's, I think, where the intent would be in terms of trying to keep, it follows with the material guidelines too, where trying to keep somewhat of the character of the historic district. That's just my guess. I mean, but that's what I found in the past.
But I take issue only with the fact that what we have is a car vehicle overflow onto the main streets, which narrows the ability to actually drive on the streets. The concern is if a private property owner wants to develop and build something, and we can probably designate between whether that's more of a townhome or a single family home. But if I'm building a single family home and I have a 50-foot or a 60-foot wide lot, and aesthetically the balance of the front facade works with a second or 2-car garage, if I put 2 single doors there, how is that looking differently than it would be if it was one continuous door? Because you can do it with 2 single doors. So that's my point. That break line all of a sudden makes it a completely different architectural. It doesn't. To me, it doesn't. So
the double garage door traditionally is looked at as being much more contemporary. That's
right, but I don't
my
think it's fair to all of a sudden use contemporary as almost not that it's being blackballed, but almost look at it and say that we should control whether someone who's building a new single family home has the ability to do that. Because as a constituent, as someone who lives in the neighborhood, I've seen the effect of it not working only to the extent that it overflows into the street. And that's what frustrates me, because if someone wants to do it and they don't, I'm not saying go into a 1920s or 1930s home and rip apart the front elevation to accommodate a huge garage. I'm saying on a more new construction front, on that initiative, if that application comes forth, I don't see how that doesn't work in that case. I can think of 2 construction homes that are going up probably next year. I'm just thinking if there's latitude there in designating between, or at least making that point between the ordinance to call for a differentiation between existing, contributing, and new construction and non-contributing. And I would even go as far as to say that if it's single family, townhomes, I agree with what Veronica said. A townhome should not have a front facade, which is a complete dominant garage. That doesn't make sense. But there is some degree of discretion there to where it does work. And I just don't like the amount of cars that we see on the street in Sailboat Bend. No one can tell me that it doesn't take away from the charm of the neighborhood. It doesn't. It does. It hands down does.
It does. But the here's the deal is that, unfortunately, when I moved in the neighborhood, it was single family homes. We moved here because of the historical homes and because of the large yards. So as many homes that I've seen torn down, little cute homes with big yards and oak trees torn down, and multifamily, of course you're going to have more cars, because you're taking one single family home away and you're building, where 10 families or however many families can live. So yes, there's going to be more traffic. And, so I see what you're saying, but I was initially answering your question, why is that's such a big deal? And I think maybe it's because when that rule was put in or whatever, it was because it was new to us. We had this great historical that wasn't protected. It wasn't. We had the historical board, but because of the loopholes, I couldn't get a fence, and developers could build,
So
multi-family.
maybe we can ask.
That's how it happened.
Maybe we can ask Trisha what the philosophy is from the city. Trish?
Well, similar to, when you're talking about best practices within a historic district, the main point of instituting design guidelines is to help retain the existing character and to have compatible construction within the district to the historic structures. So making sure that the scale and the massing is compatible, but also making the environment for the pedestrian to walk around more friendly, with less paving, and just having the garage entrances limited on the street frontages.
I'm not quite sure how to finalize this topic, but we do have a long meeting and we may want to get started with everyone else talking. Is there a way to somehow incorporate Richard's comments into our discussion? And I don't know what we can do with it now, but I'm just curious.
So I completely agree with you, Arthur. I know we need to move it along. And the one other point I want to make, and I'll make it extremely brief, on the accordion shutters, that's another one for me that I'm left scratching my head on. I can understand where it pulls away from the aesthetic of a front elevation, but when there's a storm, and we haven't luckily had one that's been too recent to memory to have to scramble by, but if someone wants to implement and put accordion shutters on their windows because they do, and to protect their property, I don't know why the board or any ordinance is getting in the way of that. That to me is.
I think part of it is that I don't know any historic districts that allow this in other cities. You don't move to a historic district, perhaps. I agree with you. It is a level of protection, but there are certain standards in a historic district, and I guess that's what everybody would
Well,
like.
then we need to find a way to be more able to notice that, I think, because, you know, in my real estate practice, when we pull a lien search, there's no advisement that Sailboat Bend's historical district coming with clear
Well,
restrictions.
we dealt with that about a year ago. Didn't we have somebody from the property appraiser come and speak to us? And they
but even still, more so on a transfer of ownership, when someone's doing due diligence in their inspection period, there needs to be some way to notify them of what they're buying into, similar to what you get from a homeowners association, an estoppel of some sort, because this kind of flies at you. And I think at least the accordion piece just kind of gets me a little rattled, because if I want to be able to know that in 10 minutes I can block up my house and be able to know I'm secure from a hurricane, then I take issue with that private right of ownership kind of conflicting here with the ability to have it everywhere else around your house, but not on the front elevation. So just one other point, and I'll drop it there because I know we have a very long meeting tonight, but those are my 2 comments.
Does anyone else have any comments, questions? So I had one, no, actually my question was answered. I'm sorry. Trisha, should we move to public comment?
Yes, if you're done with your discussion from the board, then we
Yes.
can move forward with public comment. I'll have Yvonne take the people that signed up to speak in the order in which they signed up.
And everyone, how long to speak?
There's 3 minutes to speak.
Okay.
So I see that there are several people with their hands raised, but I am going to call the names in order of that they signed up on our website to speak, to avoid any confusion on my part. So first I have Stephanie Wedgeworth signed up to speak.
Hello. How are you guys?
Welcome.
There's a speaker on here that
You muted yourself.
Stephanie, please, if you can mute
You have to
any
unmute.
other device you have on the meeting.
You have to unmute. You
I'm
can't-
sorry, what happened?
If you can mute any other device that you have on the meeting, we're getting a feedback from you.
Can you hear me clearly now?
Yes.
Okay.
May I request something of the city monitor real quick? Could you put the time up on the screen so that we can make sure that it's 3 minutes for each person to?
I was trying to ask, there's a person on the meeting who has to leave because we didn't know that it was going to be an hour before we all got to speak. And I was wondering if I could let Gus Carbonell speak and then I speak in his place so he can scooch off.
Okay, I just want the city, this is Shari, the city moderator, could you put the time up on the screen? For each person, it's 3 minutes. The timer.
See what we could do, but we don't have a timer right now.
Oh, well.
Sorry, I'll keep track.
Okay.
So Stephanie, I'll let you give Gus your 3 minutes and I'll put you in his spot.
So much.
What's the person?
I don't see Gus signed up on the attendee list.
I
Okay.
don't have anybody by the name.
So who are we calling?
Okay, he's not on the call, so we'll go ahead and take Stephanie.
Okay. All right.
Stephanie, you have 3 minutes.
All right. Okay. Well, my name is Stephanie Wedgeworth, and I live in one of the few contributing historic homes in Sailboat Bend at 915 Middle Street. And I'd like to begin, first of all, by talking about the definition of discrimination. The definition is the unjust or prejudicial treatment of different categories of people or things. And we, the property owners of Sailboat Bend, are experiencing discrimination. As a Black female, I'm acutely aware of what discrimination looks like and feels like, and the property owners in Sailboat Bend are not being asked what we would like to do with our historic homes. We're being told what to do with our historic homes. Ordinances are being changed without our direct input, and the current historic overlay continues to be a chokehold on every property owner who wishes to improve or update their homes or property, including the development of the community. No one else in this entire city of Fort Lauderdale is being treated in this nature, and that to me is prejudicial and discriminatory. The rules and guidelines that the Historic Preservation Board uses are arbitrary and capricious. I walk through our neighborhood and I see newly developed townhomes and condos that are in no way historic, in no way do they look like my contributing home. When you look at the architectural survey that Trisha Logan has completed, it states clearly that the majority of the properties in Sailboat Bend are not in fact historic. So I don't know how we can call an entire area historic and put a designation on it when the majority of the homes are not historic. So when you look at other successful cities, those foster innovation and they adapt to changing economic circumstances. To succeed in the modern economy, cities must be free to adapt as economic conditions change. Historic designations impede adaptation and they result in a city's past determining its future. And today, cities that are thriving are those that offer people dining, retail, and plentiful entertainment options. And by design, this is either not occurring or it's happening much slower in a historic district. This especially is problematic when historic districts like Sailboat Bend are concentrated in the most walkable areas of the city. There's evidence that people value walkable neighborhoods, and as I'm sure you're aware, walkability results in higher neighborhood housing values. I think as city officials, we can be smarter than this. I think we want to see Sailboat Bend. I think you guys want to see Sailboat Bend just like other communities grow and prosper. Property owners' rights are being denied. Developers are staying away. Majority of the homes are not historic. I just don't understand why the property owners in Sailboat Bend are being treated differently than Rio Vista and Coley Hammock that have historic homes as well. And when anyone, I just would like for the discrimination to stop against those people that have historic homes in Sailboat Bend. And I ask you to please listen to the majority of the property owners in Sailboat Bend and remove the historic district designation and do not move forward with the new ordinance. It's unfair and is prejudicial to those who have contributing historic homes. That's all I have, and thank you very much for your time and for listening.
So next to speak, I have Sharon Wilkins, and I will start the timer.
Unmute ourselves, yeah.
Okay, if you could please hold the timer for just a minute, because I'm actually representing the neighborhood, and I believe the person that represents the neighborhood gets 5 minutes. But beyond that, I really need to be moved to the back because I'm hoping some folks will donate time to me because I really need to speak longer than 5 minutes. And I do apologize to this board. I realize that this is going to be a long meeting, but this is a very important meeting. And so I want to make sure I have the full scope of the time that I needed so that I can really express our feelings and our views. So I guess, Mr. Marcus, that would be up to you. I'm not sure how we proceed, but I can assure you that I need more than 5 minutes.
You're welcome to go to the.
Chair,
yes.
we need to just clarify exactly who she is. Is she?
Okay, I'm sorry, Sherry. I'm Sharon Wilkin. I am the treasurer of the Sailboat Bend Civic Association. Ruth Clark, our president, is not well this evening. I'm speaking in her stead. And I also wrote each member of the board a letter, which I was planning to read, but I have some additional information I need to share that Ruth was going to share. So I've sort of merged two different people into one, and I do apologize. I know that
we did receive your letter.
Okay,
I'm still going to review it with you, sir.
Can we determine how many people are speaking to the issue of rescinding the historic denomination and which people are speaking to the issues that Trish raised?
I'm speaking to both, if you're asking me.
Well, if
And-
you're speaking to both, we aren't considering.
Oh, I understand that. I'm well aware. I've been to every meeting for the past several months. And I actually would like to point out that Tim, I think it's Mr. Shavino, I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing your name, and Mr. Rosa have it absolutely right. This meeting was born out of the fact that Mr. Allen had the ballot in front of him, and his exact words were, "I'm not so sure what's so negative about Sailboat Bend," and a large discussion ensued, and it was decided by your board that we should have a discussion. So when the agenda came out, the neighbors in Sailboat Bend, the Civic Association, were quite surprised, to be perfectly honest. We thought we were having a discussion with you all to share what is so negative about the historic district in Sailboat Bend. So that's where we're at, and I'm not sure how we got.
If I could just interject, Chair, so that we could kind of do this better. May I just make a suggestion that we just call folks that are ready to speak? So if she's not ready, let's just move on to someone else, and they need to be ready to speak. Okay.
But Shari, I do want.
If you could just mute her so we could proceed with the next person, please.
Oh my God.
But the larger point is that
thank you.
we're addressing issues that we're not considering. And if we have another meeting specific.
Ms. Lyons, this is Shari. They could say whatever they want. We're not considering that issue. I did state that in the beginning of the meeting. This usually happens whenever there's an ordinance regarding Sailboat Bend. So they are going to state whatever they'd like to. They can legally do so. If we could just proceed with the next person.
So the next person signed up to speak is Tori Williams. And once you start, I will start the timer, or the time will start. Tori Williams, are you there?
Yes, it's Tony, T-O-N-I Williams.
Please go ahead.
Tony Williams. I live at 21 Charlie Avenue. I live in a contributing home. And, since we didn't move here, our family built this home back in 1925. We're fourth generation. We actually asked Grandma when we knew that we were going to be living into this house, what would she like for us to do with it? And she told us, we really don't care, because I know you don't want to live in this old house. It's not efficient. The windows are rattling and things like that. But we said, you know what? We want to carry on. But since we've moved in, we've found that these older homes are much harder to take care of. They cost a lot to repair. And sometimes the repairs just aren't worth what it would be better just to be able to yes, take it down and rebuild. But regardless of all that, I started looking up different things as a native Floridian, walking through this neighborhood to Stranahan High School back in the day when I lived in the city, and that was torn down for various reasons. Historic is where it's famous or important. Sailboat Bend, it's not labeled historic in very many places. Actually, I read in one area where it's mostly apartments and houses need to be upgraded or renovated. 2/3 of us are 2/3 of the neighborhood are renters. 1/3 own. Where I live in a 2-block radius, I have 7 businesses, 2 churches, a few older homes that have gotten themselves out of being contributed for various reasons. And you know what? And we're bookends to our bookends are 2 condos who think that they should have a say in what we do. Until you've lived in this older home and you've had to repair it and you've had to deal with what it takes to do, I don't think that, you really should have a say. Also, what I want to say is this has been going on for quite some time. Back in January of 2014, Sun Sentinel actually ran an article about Sailboat Bend wanting to be rescinded. Because yes, it is discrimination. We are being singled out. Those of us that live in the older homes that are harder to maintain, cost more money to repair, more to insure, and sometimes you can't even get insurance. We need help. We need this historic district gone because the district is not a district. It's just a very few homes. As I said, I'm one of about 40. There's fourplexes all around me. And that's what I thought this meeting was about. When I spoke at the last meeting, I was told, oh no, you'll have your chance on the 21st. That's when we're hearing all about Sailboat Bend. I don't believe anybody's really listening to us. You know what? Because every time we go to speak, it's like, oh, but this ain't all about that. Well, when is it going to be about us? Thank you.
Next on the list to sign up is Tanner Tibbetts.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi. Yeah, I'm Tanner Tibbetts. I live at 321 Lauderdale Trail. I bought my home about a year ago. Before I bought it, it actually was featured on a Telemundo soap opera as a crack home. And I think that is pretty in line with a bunch of other homes in the neighborhood. And that is all due to the oppressive stipulations in this historic district and designation. It prohibits growth, prohibits development, and really what you're getting is people who do not live in our neighborhood telling us homeowners what we can do to our homes. It's essentially taxation without representation. You know, we're not being taxed, but straight from the government, but the cost of renovating our homes, the cost of upkeeping the homes is essentially a tax on us, levied by people who don't even live in the neighborhood. I was under the impression as well that this was about rescinding the designation. It kind of seems like you guys are just kicking the can down the road, hoping to put it off for another day, and that day will never come. It's also pretty crazy that, you know, majority of the homes in the neighborhood are non-conforming. There are plenty of dumps around the neighborhood, and it seems like we're keeping this pipe dream of a historic designation in place to appease a few people who do not even live in the neighborhood. It needs to be rescinded. It would cause our property values to go up, more tax revenue for the city, you know, just an overall better neighborhood. It has potential to be one of the best neighborhoods in Fort Lauderdale. And the only thing that's really holding it back is the government. The people in the neighborhood, as you've heard, are willing and ready to improve their old homes, make the neighborhood nicer. And it seems like you guys are holding back, you know, the innovation and development that is necessary to bring our neighborhood up into the, you know, the rest of Fort Lauderdale. That's really all I have to say. I hope that, you know, the rest of the neighborhood gets to air their grievances and that you guys will actually listen to us. We own property here, we pay our taxes, and it kind of seems like you guys are shutting us out, and it's honestly wrong. Like I said before, it's discrimination, and it's honestly, it needs to stop. That's all I have to say.
Tanner, this is Arthur Marcus on the board. One question for you. When you bought into Sailboat Bend, were you aware that it's a historic district beforehand? Hello?
Can you hear me now? Sorry, I was muted. Yeah, I was aware that it was historic society.
I'm sorry, you were or were not? I couldn't hear you. I'm sorry.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yeah, so I was aware that it was a historic designation, but I was not aware of all the, you know, the stipulations that come along with that. You know, I was not aware of any of these rules. It wasn't presented to me by the realtor. Maybe I should have done more due diligence on my end, but it doesn't.
We've all learned that
presented to me.
Realtors do their job, but they don't know about this, and this is obviously something we need to fix. Thank you very much.
They should know about it.
They should. They should know about it, but they don't. We've heard this repeatedly, Barbara.
I mean,
Well, can you still hear me?
A real estate agent wouldn't let somebody know that it's an historic district and what the rules are.
I agree.
Can you still hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Yeah, the real estate agent that's selling the home really doesn't have any reason to really say that it is a historic designation, because if anything, it's going to turn people off. So if they're trying to sell a home, you know, they're not going to be like, oh, well, actually, to get anything done, it's impossible. You're going to have to spend a bunch of money. Your home's inefficient. You won't be able to upgrade. That's not a selling point. So obviously, they're not going to say all those things. because they're trying to make their money. They're trying to sell a home just like the homeowner is.
They should be telling you the truth. We need to move on, and thank you very much.
They are legally obligated to full disclosure, and you know
Yes.
that as well as I do.
Next on the list, I have Ken Powell.
Can you hear me now?
Yes. We can hear you.
Okay, I need to, okay, my name is Ken Powell. I live at 1216 Southwest 4th Court, and I've owned property in Sailboat Bend for 10 years. I submitted with my request to speak a couple of documents that I don't necessarily need to have displayed, but I would like to include them as part of the record. The first document is the guidelines for preparing district nominations for the National Registry. I'd like to read the first paragraph of that document, which states, a historic district possesses a significant concentration, linkage, or continuity of sites, buildings, structures, or objects united historically or aesthetically by plan or physical development, unquote. I wish Sailboat Bend had the attributes referred to in this description of a historic district. If our neighborhood had significant concentration of structures built during the period of significance, which is pre-1940, we would all take pride in preserving this period of time. Unfortunately, our neighborhood does not have that continuity of sites, as it is inconsistent from street to street. We have multiple intrusions of non-contributing structures and buildings that convey no sense of historic significance, and it certainly does not look the same as it did in 1940. The burden of the historic regulations on our neighborhood far outweighs any benefit the city or the public receives in trying to make our neighborhood into something it is not. The historic designation has been a failed attempt to save a neighborhood in decline. I reviewed the recently released architectural resource studies prepared by Erica Mullen Consulting related to other neighborhoods throughout the city. These surveys are much different than Sailboat Bend since they focus on a much smaller area with a heavy concentration of potential historic structures. That method of historic preservation makes sense. Why hold down an entire neighborhood just to save a handful of old buildings that may be worthy of preservation? I'd like to address Mr. Chabon for a moment. I have great respect for you and the comments you made at during this meeting and at the City Commission meeting of July 10th, 2018. During the discussion relating to the architectural resource study of the Central Beach area, at that meeting, you were passionate about the investment you made in your neighborhood and how you'd worked hard for your money and how you planned ahead and counted on growth in your area. You also spoke about historic preservation and how it needs owner's consent to make it work. These are all the same emotions we have about our investments in Sailboat Bend. We want our neighborhood to achieve to its fullest potential, and the current regulations are holding us down, not lifting us up. We need to make any further advancements with this in a public setting. Tonight is an example that these Zoom meetings do not work as a potential and a platform that we need in order to be in person. And I ask that the HPB review the further platform of this meeting.
Thank you.
Next, I will try Gus Carbonell again if he's available.
We don't see anybody with the name locked in.
So the next to sign up to speak is Sum Lin.
You hear me?
Yeah. Yes.
Yes, my name is Sum Lin. I'm at 705 Bryan Place. I have a couple of comments on the ordinance as well as Sailboat Bend in general. I will use my property as an example and why it's been a challenge to conform to historic district guidelines. My property is fronted on 3 sides: Kuntai Court on the north, Bryan Place to the south, and Cooley Avenue to the east. So I'm hit 3 times as much when it comes to these guidelines and regulations, just on doing fences, I cannot build fences that's higher than 3 feet. I guess now with the proposed update is 4 feet. That's 3 sides to my properties, and I have a pool and a spa in the back that there's no way to conceal or to have privacy. I just don't understand that even the Florida swimming pool regulation safety code require 48 inches and a latch to be at 52. And why would historic code guidelines conflict with and compete with safety code? And the rationale I kept hearing is the 3 feet or the 4 feet maximum fence height limit is to encourage pedestrian traffic. And we have plenty of pedestrian traffic there. And every Saturday, Sunday, Monday morning, I walk around my property and I pick up beer bottles that shatter in the glasses right underneath the fences, soda cans and fast food bags and containers and cigar wrappers. So if my fence, if there's a hurricane that approaches and blows off all my fences and I have to rebuild everything to up to 4 feet, I would have no privacy. People would just throw stuff right into my backyard. And I don't understand why there's not any special consideration to property that are facing street on multiple sides like corner lots. In my case, I'm facing 3 sides. And I've seen a lot of the guideline have terms that says the front facade, front elevation, but really is visibility from the right of way. I also do not understand why accordion shutters are not allowed where the building is visible from the street. In my cases, 3 sides cannot have accordion shutters. Frankly, I don't understand why there would be any historic design guideline competes with life safety decisions like hurricane shutters. Does it mean that one day if FPL decide to give us underground electric service fees, the city would reject it because they would prefer to keep the gracefully hanging overhead wires from the power poles to our houses because they're part of our historic fabric?
So next,
Thank you very much.
I have signed up to speak George Granaris. Sorry for the pronunciation.
Okay, thank you very much. I live at 712 Southwest Bryan Place. I object to all the proposed changes that were part of the presentation. I also object if it's true that non-owners of property can actually sit on the board and dictate what owners can or cannot do with their property is very problematic. But I find that most problematic in the historic preservation designation is who decides what is historic. And I think after the year that we've had and the things that we've learned, if we were really wanting to be a historic district, we should adopt the Chickie, which was the Seminole Indians that were here before us. And if we really want to get serious about being historic, I think it's problematic and borderline or maybe overtly racist that we don't consider that a really historic structure would be the Chickie from the Seminole Indians. So that's all I had to say. I can donate the rest of my time to whomever needs it at the end. Thank you.
Thank you.
So we will donate 1 minute, 37 seconds. And then next to sign up to speak is Jim Paras.
Can you hear me?
We can hear you.
You can hear me now?
Yes.
Hi, my name is, yeah, you hear me. My name is Jim Paras. I live at 1216 County Court in Sailboat Bend. My involvement with the historic district includes building a new house and also remodeling an older home. My experiences have been with a lot of different HPB boards, so I'm not making any reference to this board's actions, just what I have witnessed, which leads to my opinion of this historic district. We learned early on that this district was different than other historic districts, and I agree with one person's description that getting approvals was a bit like playing Russian roulette. I've been to a lot of HPB meetings where people ask to make alterations to their home that match features that are on homes that surround them. And when they are denied, they are simply told that was there before this became a historic district, or that was just approved by another board. When people are denied something that was granted to someone else, they feel discriminated against. This causes unhappiness with the historic district, and people become angry with the HPB. And in many cases, they become angry with the neighbor that was allowed to do something that they were not. With more time, I could name many instances where this unfairness was leveled, and I believe this inconsistent application of the code has not only caused contention and divided our neighbors, it's the reason developers steer clear of our neighborhood. I've been a board member on the Civic Association for the past 2 years, and I was there last year when a vote was taken to abolish the historic district. And I think it came at a time when members felt like the city is no longer listening to us. I was here in 2013 when the same vote was taken, and neighbors got together for over 2 months of weekly visioning sessions. There were as many as 80 people at one meeting, and we got together to brainstorm as to what we could do to make this historic district work for us instead of against us. At the end, we were unable to find a better answer and agreed that the best thing for the neighborhood would be to remove the designation. Like many, I feel the city has just written our neighborhood off long ago. Last year, our commissioner promised us a seat at the table to discuss and give our input to the update as it was being written. And at our association, we worked hard to put together an SBHD review committee of knowledgeable individuals that included some of the original founders of the historic district. Well, that promise was broken and we were not included. Over the course of the year, the city presented the updates at several meetings, but that information was not always complete or correct. It was presented to us in pieces, and many still don't understand much of it and have unanswered questions. People are frustrated and more divided than ever over the changes that are being made.
Next, I have Donnie Cohen.
Hello?
We
Donnie?
don't see anybody with that name.
Okay.
And I have Julianne Wood.
Hello? I guess not. Maybe we should move to the next one.
I think she's there. Just
She's there?
Yes.
Yes.
Julie, can you unmute your microphone?
We can try to come back to her.
Actually, I'm
issues.
sorry. Okay. So my name is Julie Wood. I live at 425 Palm Avenue in Sailboat Bend. We bought our home in 2016. We fell in love with Sailboat Bend and the proximity to downtown, how multicultural the neighborhood is and how it really does have something for everyone. We also believe this would be a good investment for our family. However, our family is, our home is a upper. We sorely underestimated the amount of money, time, and the process we would have to undergo in order to make necessary repairs and upgrades. Because of the reputation of the historic district, we've had considerable trouble even finding architects, contractors, and construction companies that will even consider working in Sailboat Bend. They know they can get work in any other neighborhood in Fort Lauderdale and not have the significant hassle. Ultimately, we've decided at this time it's not worth our investment. The ordinance is holding back good buyers from investing in our neighborhood. It puts an unfair burden on the existing owners. It's impeding progress. Our neighborhood survey and all the testimonies that you heard today show overwhelmingly that our neighborhood wants this lifted. Subjectively picking and choosing properties on the list is a horrible idea and makes things less fair. If you've driven on our streets, you would see how run down at least half the neighborhood is. There is no concentration of historic homes in this area. I respectfully ask that our elected officials seriously consider the wants of the constituents here. And we'd just like to be heard.
Thank you.
Next, I have signed up J.R. Steele.
Hello? Hello?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, great. My name is J.R. Steele. I live at 817 County Court. I can remember 2008 when I bought my house. I was thrilled, and I am completely in love with the house that was built in 1924 with the fireplace that is just stunning, and I adore this property. I am against these proposed updates and would also like to see this designation, just that we can have this burden removed from us. A good friend of mine was the president of this board, Nolan Hahn, and he's given me permission to speak on his behalf tonight. And he was the president for 4 years, and he left this board disgusted because when it was convenient for the city to make, they made exceptions, but required the taxpayers to comply and will fine. And there's stories of what people have had to go through with the fines, but the city will make exceptions. And you could see the 8.5 acres that were torn down, and homes across the street fell into disarray. And those homes qualified, but yet they found exceptions. And so this is arbitrary and capricious. It's not fair. Changes are made without considering the will of the people. Tonight, we have been spoken to as they. Hello, yes, it's us. I put every single penny that I work for as a teacher. I don't have a lot of money, and I put it into this house. And you know what? I can't get the windows redone because of the cost and the burden. But my windows need to be redone, but I can't because of what's being asked. I can't redo my fence. Why? Because now you want it to be 3 feet instead of 4, and my dog will run out. I bought this house based on the fact as a single woman that I can have my dog here as a protection for me. But the things change. I think we need to be heard. And it's so sad because this is causing pain. And I love my neighbors. I love this community. But this is causing division to us in this community. It's hurting our community, and it's hurting us who are trying to take care of our homes and make our community beautiful. Please, please listen to us and treat us with respect. We pay the taxes. I just had my insurance increased by $2,500. It's cost a lot.
Thank you.
Next, I have signed up Don Wilkin.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Okay, thank you. So my name is Don Wilkin. I live at 301 Kenilworth Place, AKA Southwest 14th Way. You probably know it. It's called the somewhere near the preserve in Sailboat Bend. I'm a 35-year resident of Sailboat Bend in the same location. I'm a 35-year registered architect with offices in Fort Lauderdale. I've been practicing architecture in Fort Lauderdale for over 35 years. I was a member of the Historic Preservation Board for 6 years, which I chaired for 2 years. I was active, and I became active in the Sailboat Deck Civic Association when the ordinance was originally adopted. And like many property owners, I was against the designation, primarily based on the proposed infringement on my basic property rights. I got involved to make sure that the underlying zoning rights were not infringed upon. Most agree at that time that having a simple materials guideline that provided a list of materials that were consistent with pre-1940 structures that could, the period of significance that could be used on the exterior building was okay as long as you don't touch any of my other underlying zoning rights for setbacks, heights, accessory structures, fencing, etc. One of my primary issues with the ordinance is the way it's being randomly used for terms like compatibility and harmony, taken out from another entire section of another ordinance the city has, 47-11, that they apply to this district. It's wrong and beyond the original intent. There have been plenty of historic properties on other locations that were multifamily residential zone properties should be able to develop on properties such as Village of Sailboat Bend, Waverly Place. There were buildings torn down that were historic. So I'd like to, it's only 3 minutes here, so I wanted to speak to a few of the things like fences, gates, and landscaping. I sent some pictures in of some existing fences, gates, and landscaping in the neighborhood. I see no issues with any of these. They're nice examples. They're more than 4 feet high. They're 6 foot. They're decorative. Since when has landscaping suddenly become an ordinance where you can't have a privacy fence in front of your home that's more than, privacy landscaping more than 3 foot? Accessory buildings in front yards that allow them to current zoning, and suddenly you can't have them. So if you have a property that sits on the back of a piece of property in the rear yard, you can't have anything in the front. This ordinance leaves out critical language in 4717 with reference to the Sailboat Bend study, which actually established the period of significance. It also is a statement that the purpose of the guidelines is to identify a range of materials and design options to encourage the redevelopment of the compatible historic characters of the neighborhood. All of that's gone. You're trying to get rid of the historic, except 4717, wrap it into a much more restrictive ordinance.
Thank you.
So I've been involved. I'm really disappointed. You know, I'm offended that this city administration would move forward with more restrictions and not have a charrette and get together with the preservation board and members of the community. I've worked on numerous charrettes, Central Beach, Riverwalk, Sistfront Corridor, Downtown Master Plan, Sailboat Bend Historic District, and this is just being railroaded through. What's the rush, people?
Next,
For what?
I have signed up Jamie Deal.
Hi, I'd like to speak. I have a contributing home built in 1927, and I've heard a lot of the comments tonight. And first off, I'd like to ask if somebody could please tell me what night and what meeting are we going to be able to speak about this being rescinded. It's been made aware that tonight is not the night. So now I would like to know, when is the night? Can we have that concrete answer for us as property owners? I think that is obviously what a lot of us came here to talk about. And the fact that that is not on the agenda, we'd like to know when it will be. And I also am in agreement because all of these restrictions feel like a penalty to us as homeowners. And I don't really see any benefit that we are getting. I just have to renew my insurance, and I have barely any options because I have a wood frame home that no one will insure, barely, because of hurricanes. We need to update our properties. I'm also a real estate agent, and it doesn't make sense. There are so many reasons, and it's being stated by all of our neighbors. And I would like to know when we can actually get together and talk about these things. So if that could get that answer, I would really appreciate it. And I'd like to donate my time to the one lady that spoke earlier that said she was representing the community. So thank you.
Thank you. I have a question for Trisha. Since so many people are talking about the issue of rescinding the historic district, what is the city's process so everybody understands that?
We don't have an active application or complete application for that purpose to rescind the designation. So there's nothing scheduled for that purpose.
Where would the request come from? That's what.
So for any request to amend or rescind a historic designation of a district or a landmark, it goes through the same process in which it was designated. So an application would need to be received, a complete application would need to be received by the city for that request.
From whom?
And depending on who is applying, it could be the neighbors themselves.
Can I help, Trisha?
Sure.
So in 472411, subsection C, it lists who can apply for rescinding the designation. So it says either it has to be a motion by the Historic Preservation Board, and this is Shari, by the way, or a motion by the City Commission, or by a homeowner with respect to its own property, but this is different because this is a district. Regarding a district, it has to be a simple majority of property owners that are requesting rescinding the district. So we would need a vote, a record of a vote. Or, and then the other one is a corporate resolution from a nonprofit, which is something different. But those are the ways of the particular individuals or entities that can request to rescind the designation. And then it will go forward with an application coming before the Historic Preservation Board, and then to the Planning and Zoning Board, and then to the City Commission for the district itself.
So you're saying that any request needs to originate from the neighborhood or the neighborhood organization?
It can be the neighborhood, or it can be a motion by the City Commission, or it can be a motion by the Historic Preservation Board. So it can be any of those ways, but the neighborhood is able to do it if they have a simple majority and they can illustrate that with a motion.
I just wanted to get the process.
Signature of all the names and addresses and phone numbers. So that's in 472411.
Thank you.
Shari, quick question on that, just to follow up on it. Is a simple majority, just to clarify for all the attendees, is that based on the literal count of homes? Because now we have a contributing versus a non-contributing. So are we talking about the actual overlay, the actual the historical district, or presumably with accurate notice and correct notice, would that be based on the count that was received back based on something going out to then count for a vote? Does that make sense? And what
Our code, the language in our code says a simple majority of property owners. So it needs to be the majority of property owners that are located in that district.
So it would need to be 51% of all the homes that are located in the actual district.
No, the property owners, not the homes, but the property owners. So if it's owned by 5 individuals, it would be including all those persons that own that home.
No, I follow, but if we went just folio by folio, taking into account that there could be multiple owners, husband and wife, whatever that might be, but you need 51% to account for something that would be, for lack of a better term, certified to be able to then take that next step. Or further question, isn't the historical district, isn't the civic association by definition, isn't that a 5013C? Isn't it a nonprofit, or is it not? I believe it is.
Well, what we have in our code is, it says that it's a nonprofit corporation that must be registered with the Florida Division of Corporations for at least 5 years and have maintained a recognized interest in historic preservation for 5 years. So I'm not sure, I can't opine one way or another at whether or not it's a nonprofit, but I do know that these are the ways that the district can be rescinded. So there's a few different ways.
Just trying to give the avenues to what it seems to be the overlying theme of tonight's meeting, even though it's not the actual item on the agenda. Clearly, it seems like this is what everyone wants to speak about. So to use the time productively to think about what there could be recourse-wise or action, as an action.
Well, and that's why I wanted to get this out on the table.
Right. No, it's a great point, Arthur, and I'm glad you brought it up. I'm just trying to take it to the one next more granular level on how that then pushes forth. And
we should let everybody else speak tonight too.
Right, and just another thing, then it would need to also show in its application that it no longer meets the criteria under which it was designated under. So I'm not sure which criteria it was designated under, but all of that criteria needs to no longer be applicable at this time. So
understood. Thank you.
Thank you. So who's next on our list?
Next sign up to speak is Edward Strobel.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
This is Edward Strobel. Christina and I live at 716 Bryan. We are for rescinding historical designation, and we would like to give all of our 6 minutes to Sharon Wilkins.
Thank you.
Chair, I still need to verify with the city attorney, Shari, if the time can be donated.
Well, that is up to the chair. I don't have an issue with that, but if the chair would like to allow that to be done.
I don't have an issue with that. I'd like to somehow, limit it to a certain amount of time instead, but let's see where we are at the end.
So far you have about 9 minutes donated to her.
Okay.
And
Let's
next sign
move
up
on.
to speak is Christina Strobel.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Sorry, yeah, she had to leave. She told me to give her time to Sharon as well.
Okay.
So next to sign up to speak is Aphrodite Worthbrof. I'm so sorry with the pronunciation.
Hello?
Yes, hello. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay. Yes, I am a longtime resident of Sailboat Bend. I've been here since 1983. I've seen this neighborhood go through quite a lot of changes. I think the most significant change for improvement in this neighborhood really was when Riverwalk came through. I don't think it had anything to do with the designation. I do not support the historical designation. I believe it has discouraged any improvement in quality of our neighborhood or our community. I would like to defer the rest of my time to Sharon Wilken. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next sign up to speak, I have Gary Musachuk.
Hello?
Yes, hello. Can you hear me? Hi, my name's Gary Musachuk. I live in a contributing single-family home at 915 Middle Street. And the designation of the neighborhood as historic seems to be very unfair to the property owners and should be rescinded, considering the arduous property owners that we have to go through to maintain our properties. Using the initial guidelines for the historic district, from what I understand, was before the 1940s as the period of significance. And I've gone through the neighborhood with the tax records, through the IMAP tax records. I work in real estate and have broken down the properties, the classification of the properties and the years built. And I'd like to share that with you so you can get an idea and understand that I used 1950s and before 1950, and designating the entire neighborhood as historic is detrimental to the property owners and it's unjustified. I do realize that this neighborhood holds the site of the original Fort Lauderdale and other historic elements, but designating the entire neighborhood as historic has caused only stagnation and decay of the neighborhood. And in no way is it lifting it up. And I haven't seen the city do much to preserve the neighborhood. If it's so important to the city that we remain historic, where's the contribution to the city to lift it? Property values have suffered and property owners are being discriminated against unjustly. As I mentioned, I work in real estate. I had Gus Carbonell, who is a property owner in the neighborhood, a former member of the Historic Preservation Board, and also a prominent architect in the area. He's worked for many years, and he was not able to speak tonight because the initial meeting went on for about 45 minutes before we were able to speak. The neighborhood from property owners is about 655 units. There was only about, built before 1950, less than 10% of single family homes, or only about 60 single family homes in the entire neighborhood were built before 1950. I think that the historic district should be rescinded, and we shouldn't allow the additional URDL codes to be placed on his Sailboat Bend. And this meeting should continue on in an open forum where we can actually sit and speak with city officials.
Thank you very much.
Next, I have Stephen Morales.
Stephen, hello.
We don't see anybody by that name.
And I have Jason Deal.
Is Jason on the list?
I'm on the list. Hello.
Hi.
Well, thank you for listening to us tonight. I think it's been very apparent and hopefully obvious that the majority of owners in Sailboat Bend with contributing and also probably non-contributing homes are in favor of rescinding, even though that's not the topic of this meeting, as we have learned. So thank you for teaching us and showing us the way that we can go about doing this. I'm sure that will be continued at another date. As far as I have a couple questions. One is that I'd like to know when the last update to contributing houses was updated, because it seems like it's changed in the last maybe year or so. Maybe Trisha or someone could answer that.
The original designation did not identify structure by structure with a list of properties as if they were considered contributing, or I think the language specifically used was historic and contributing and compatible. And then there was an updated survey in 2009 that was completed and that identified properties, but as contributing or non-contributing or compatible, however, it was never adopted.
So the chart of contributing homes that you showed in your presentation tonight, when was that mapped out as each of those being contributing?
That was done over the past 2 years as part of this updated architectural resource survey.
Okay. I guess I'm the unlucky owner of 3 properties now. I thought it was only 2. And to go back to a further conversation, when we purchased 213 Lauderdale Trail, our realtor never informed us of a historic designation, although I knew the neighborhood had that designation. That property showed on the tax roll as built in 1955 at that time, and now it has since been changed by the property appraisers to show a date of 1920 something. So some curious things there. And now the cottage that exists on that same property is shown as designated as contributing as well. So a little curious as to how those just got changed out of thin air, so to speak. But I think that the whole thing speaks to the majority of the neighborhood hoping and pushing to rescind the historic designation. So I also would just like to ask briefly if a property doesn't meet some of the new criteria, if it gets past of these codes, will they be forced to change any of those issues, such as fences or driveways that don't meet the new code? And will they be cited for violations if they don't?
No, this ordinance would not compel a property owner to make any alterations or changes. It would only be for a new request that the guidelines would be implemented and applied.
Okay, thank you, Trisha. So I guess the moral of the story for the neighborhood is update your fences quickly. I'll dedicate the rest of my time to the Sharon Wilkins.
Thank you very much.
Next, I have Jared Stern.
I didn't get to freaking hear yours.
Can you guys hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay. My name is Jared Stern. Thank you for your time. I've been a resident of Sailboat Bend for the past 11 years. I did know it was a historic district when I moved in here. It's kind of sold to me as an appealing element. And of course, under normal circumstances, I think it would be. I just think it's the way it's been implemented has not produced, I think, the intent of of that designation. And I know a lot of people have been speaking to just rescinding the designation altogether. I frankly am in favor of that. I'm also someone who was under the understanding that this meeting was a discussion about the rescission, but having not seen that on the agenda, I know that's not really something you guys can vote on. I would ask that this board listen to the homeowners here in Sailboat Bend and find the means to allow that discussion to happen, and so that we can take the steps to potentially remove this this designation. I would say I think a lot of people on this call have or the meeting have made a lot of good points, and to speak to the agenda items, I just have to say I don't think they go they do enough. These changes that are being proposed, I think, are small concessions that aren't going to go far enough to make the lives easier for the Sailboat Bend residents to improve their properties so that the values can go up. I think the right recourse here is rescinding the designation. So I would ask that this board does not approve what has been proposed in these changes. And we as the Sailboat Bend community try to find a way, or continue, it sounds like, to try to find a way to remove this designation altogether. And I would yield the rest of my time to, I believe her name was Sharon, if that's allowable. Thank you.
Thank you.
Chair, I'm going to ask Gus Carbonell, who's now back on, to speak.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yeah, good evening and thank you. Unfortunately, I had to go off. I had a meeting with a neighborhood association about another project, but I really wanted to speak tonight. My name is Gus Carbonell. I own property in Sailboat Bend at 322 Southwest 7th Avenue for probably almost 30 years. I was also a member of the Historic Preservation Board many years ago for at least 2 or 3 years. And I have designed, as an architect, multiple projects in Sailboat Bend in the past. However, the reason I wanted to speak is because during the last 18 years or so, I have personally refused to do any work in Sailboat Bend. I have a lot of clients who approach me about building, designing, developing something in Sailboat Bend, not only in the neighborhood, but also along the commercial corridor along 7th Avenue. And as you probably heard, I didn't hear the resident speak, but I've been listening for years to the board and other people that it's very difficult to develop in Sailboat Bend. The biggest issue is the unknown. When somebody wants to purchase a piece of property, whether it's vacant or a lot of the existing buildings there would need to be demolished. They really don't know what to expect will happen after going through the process. So that's my thought. I see you're moving in the right direction with some of these changes to the code, and I really appreciate the work the staff has done. It's incredible. I went through the 400 and some pages. It's an incredible product that you presented, but I don't believe that this is going to change that. The neighborhood seems to be stuck in the past. Nothing has happened lately. It looks actually not as weedy, deteriorated, unkept in many areas. Years ago, they used to have trolley tours that we participated every year. It looked very clean. It looked like a lot happening, and it seems lately it's not. So I'll leave it at that and let others speak on the subject, and I will follow what's going on with this procedure. I do believe that having the contributing structures and the non-contributing structures defined is a big step in the right direction. And I want to wish you all happy holidays and Merry Christmas.
Thank you.
Next to speak, I have Regina Rodriguez.
Hello, Regina. Is Regina on our list?
We're looking, we can't see anybody by their name.
And next I have Megan Forzano.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Falling down fences, rotten, moldy siding, roofs caving in, so many cars parked on the street that it's difficult to walk. As one of my neighbors stated, stagnation and decay. Those are the results of the historic district of Sailboat Bend. I think everyone on this call can agree that that is not what we want from our beautiful neighborhood. I'd like to make a statement on the record that I support rescinding the historic designation. I'm Megan Forzano and own the non-contributing home at 836 County Court. All that I have seen in the 4 years I've lived here have been issues related to the historic district. I was in my backyard a few months ago and heard kayakers on the New River exclaiming to each other, "I can't believe how much that house is falling down." I happen to know the neighbor that has that house that's falling down wants to do nothing more than repair her roof, but she's been having issues due to the historic designation of her home. Removing this designation will improve our neighborhood. One other piece that I want to mention is I have been at multiple meetings in which city officials have put down the homeowners of Sailboat Bend. Even tonight, there was a comment made by one of the moderators. "Oh, this usually happens when there's a meeting with Sailboat Bend. They always do this." I pay over $13,000 in taxes each year and it's rising. Everyone else on this call, I'm sure, does as well. And we're all professionals. We're not a number of kindergartners who don't know what they want. Stephanie's statement was fantastic. I agree that the residents of Sailboat Bend are being treated with prejudice. Multiple people within Sailboat Bend understood that this discussion would be to share our views about removing the historic designation. I feel that yet again, the wool is pulled over our eyes and that it was suddenly switched to have a presentation about the proposed changes. What we want is not changes to the ordinance. We want the removal of the historic designation. I'm in sales management and I spend a lot of my days working to understand the reason and motivation behind people's positions and stances. The only thing I can possibly come up with as to why we have people in the city pushing to keep this silly historic designation that some of the neighborhood in the past thought would be good but wasn't, is there must be some financial incentive. But I look at Trisha and Mr. Marcus, they're fantastic. I'm sure that they don't need to be employed by Sailboat Bend. Perhaps that there's some benefit to the county commissioners. I have no idea. But please, hear the people of Sailboat Bend and remove the historic designation. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments.
So now I refer to Ms. Wilkins. However, there are several other people on the attendee list that did not sign up through the website. So I'm not sure how you want to handle that.
Does Ms. Wilkins want to speak now or wait till the end? I don't know.
I'm happy to do whatever, Mr. Marcus, I'm happy to do whichever you prefer. It's your choice.
Then why don't you speak since you're on right now? That would be great.
Perfect. So I first of all, I'd like to say that I wrote a lengthy letter and I hope each member of the board will please read it. Secondly, let me introduce myself. My name is Sharon Wilken. I reside
Sharon, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but Chair Marcus, could we have a clarification of how many minutes?
Yes, that's what.
They donated 12 minutes to her.
Okay. Would 12 minutes be sufficient, Sharon?
I have 15 minutes and I don't know, Mr. Marcus. I'm going to, I realize it's 3 days before Christmas Eve, 3 days after Hanukkah, and we're all worn out. I'll do the best I can.
Then let's do 15 minutes.
Okay. All right. Good evening. My name is Sharon Wilken. I reside at 301 Kenilworth Place. I've lived in Sailboat Bend since 1985. I own a non-contributing home that was built in 1971. So next year is the 50-year magic mark. I want to start off by saying that once again, and Megan said this very well, it's like switching bait. Mr. Marcus, this meeting was born out of the fact that you held up the ballot and you read that we had said that you asked what was so negative about Sailboat Bend, and a very large discussion ensued, at which time the chairman, Mr. Blank, said, I think we need to have a separate meeting. And that was meant to be this meeting, but somehow or another, and it morphed into Trisha giving a presentation about the proposed ordinances. And so once again, Sailboat Bend feels like nobody hears us and nobody cares about us. But Mr. Schiavano and Mr. Rosa, I hope I'm pronouncing your names right, they had it right. That's what this meeting was meant to be about. I would also like to add, here I am, I can't see any of you, nobody can see me, I couldn't see any of the speakers, we're dropped in and dropped out. This is not a discussion. We need to have a charrette where we can sit down as a community with you and share our feelings. The way that this is being handled is quite frankly an embarrassment, and you all are better than this. I know that. I have watched you for months. I have seen you in action. You're fair, even-minded folks. We just want our time to share our feelings. So I listened very closely. I'm not going to read my letter yet because I do have enough time, but I listened very closely to the ways that we can rescind the district. So here's the real problem. The city of Fort Lauderdale has allowed so many large condominium developments to go into Sailboat Bend that they now outnumber us. Those folks who have absolutely zero impact by living in a designated historic district, other than to say, I live in a designated historic district, they have zero impact. And yet, I believe what I just heard is they get to have a vote. Well, I don't know if this will come as a surprise, but they are not in favor of having the historic district removed. They like the idea of it. It doesn't cost them anything. They don't get put through the ringer to do any changes to their property. They just live and let live. So it seems very unfair that that's now the mark that we have to meet. The other way that I heard that the historic district could be rescinded is if the HPB, your board, asked for it to be rescinded. To me, that seems fair. I'm going to step back a minute. I'm going to talk about how the historic district came to be, because I lived here. When I moved to Sailboat Bend, I've got to tell you, I moved from Boca Raton, and I was terrified. I'll be honest with you. It was a drug-riddled, crime-infested, scary place to live. But what we did do, my husband Don and I, is we got involved in the Civic Association very, very quickly. And we found out that everybody, the people that were members of the association felt the same way we did. And we were brainstorming, and we came up and we couldn't get City Hall to listen to us. We were like the Cinderella. It was ridiculous. And we came up with this notion of the historic district, and we thought, well, that certainly will put us at the forefront. We'll be a special part of the city and good things will happen. Well, let me also tell you how it came about. Of course, you just don't make a historic district. You have to prove everyone wants it. So there's been a lot of talk about these petitions that were signed. I've heard Vice Mayor Glassman say there were several hundred petitions signed. The petitions were signed by the residents of Sailboat Bend. We went door to door. It was primarily renters. We did not reach out to property owners. We reached out to the renters. So about 25 or 30 of us drove that whole ordinance being put into place. A very small percentage of property owners represented a very large group of property owners. The whole beginning of it was unfair if you look at it from that standpoint. And to tell you the truth, it didn't do any good at all. Really, it has wreaked havoc on this neighborhood. What really did good was the city of Fort Lauderdale had really good leadership, and they recognized that the beach was a problem. The college kids were a problem. Riverwalk could be something beautiful. The downtown, all of the charrettes they did turned our great city around and Fort Lauderdale prospered. If we had had a little bit of patience, we too would be exactly like, or probably even better than, because of our location and proximity to everything, than most of the other neighborhoods. I mean, it's a great place, except for we have this horrible stigma that I think you've heard a lot about tonight. Now let's talk about the recent ballot that I know there were a lot of questions about it, and people have asked us, how did you decide who would get a ballot? Well, we talked about that for months and months. We knew we had to find a way to reach the property owners, but we didn't know the best way to do it. And so as Gary said, he did a very deep dive for us in the real estate and his side, and he gave us a very comprehensive list of property owners, which was daunting. Well, we were very fortunate because Trisha Logan did all the work for us. She came up with her architectural resource survey. She presented it to all the property owners that were going to be contributing or non-contributing. And in it, she even left off large condominiums. She would just name one or two, but she didn't specifically reach out to every single folio number. So we said to ourselves, and we said to each other, if this is good enough for the city of Fort Lauderdale, then it's good enough for us. And we sent out over, at the Civic Association's expense, mind you, and all of our volunteer time, and I'm sure you can appreciate, we're talking a lot of hours of volunteer time. We sent out the ballots and they were very, very simple. We told people if their property was contributing or non-contributing, what their site number was, what their address was, and we asked, do you vote to rescind or do you vote to keep? And we clarified, if you vote to rescind, you're voting to remove the historic district. If you vote to keep, you're voting to keep the historic district. So we sent out over 400 ballots, and of the ballots we received back, 86% said, please rescind. We vote to rescind. Now, it's like any election. Not everybody goes to the poll, but you still honor the majority of the vote because that's the way a democracy works. So we felt like to be perfectly honest, we didn't know how it was going to come back. And we felt like it was a home run, for lack of a better way to put it, for those of us that see this as just such an obstacle to our neighborhood progressing. And yet here we are, we've done all the work. We've presented the work to you. We've presented it to our commissioner. And now we're being told that we have to have 51% of the entire neighborhood that includes the Lennar PUD, that includes Waverly Place, that includes the Symphony House, that includes the Kennedy Homes. Does that sound fair to you? That's what I'm asking. Does it sound fair? Because it sure doesn't sound fair to me. I've said to more people than one, okay, so I've explained to you how we came about the district. I want to be very, very clear because I'm not following my letter at all. I explained to you how we came about the district. I explained to you how we've come about finding out that the majority of folks don't want the district. And also, in my letter, I speak directly to consider the source, because that's very important, because there are going to be folks that want to speak to say that they want to save the district. But you're going to find that most of those folks have nothing financial on the line, absolutely nothing. They just like the name. So I think what Mr. Schiavone was saying at the beginning of the meeting, do we have to listen to everybody that has zero impact, that statement that he made is very impactful in and of itself, because you really should be listening to those of us that have property on the line. Those are the folks that are impacted by this. Now, I really want to circle the wagon here, and I want to talk about how do we get where we're going. This is not the way to do it. My husband's been involved in every single charrette I think the city has ever had, and I've seen the way it's done, and it's pretty magnificent. Dropping folks in and out of a Zoom meeting where we can't see you and you can't see us. This is so impersonal. It's so wrong. It's just not right. I want to be very clear. I do not support the proposed changes. I'm lucky. I live with an architect that spoon-fed me what those changes mean, because it's a very cumbersome document. I know, because Don has explained it to me, that the changes are not good for the neighborhood. They're more restrictive. They're bad. And I encourage everyone to please do your level-headed best to wrap your head around it, including the board. This is a big, difficult document. So I am definitely not for the proposed changes. I am for rescinding the district. And I must tell you, I say that with a heavy heart as someone that worked hard to get it in place. I look at it now as an experiment that failed. It didn't work. It's holding back our neighborhood. It is damaging our property prices. And now I'm going to speak to the sociological side of it all. If you lived in this neighborhood, you would not believe the animosity, the ugliness, for lack of a better way to put it, that is going on between neighbors. I've never seen anything like it in my entire life. It's sad. It is very sad. It's horrible. A study could be done on it. I will say that I'm sure, and I know there are some homes that are historic and the property owners want to keep them historic. So why not do like you're doing in other neighborhoods and just pick out? We don't have that many, let's be honest, we really don't. It's very few, but I believe there are some, I will give you that. Identify them, reach out to the property owners, ask them if they want them to be designated historic. Work towards getting tax abatement or taxes eliminated altogether for those folks. Have Trisha write grants or get a grant writer that can help these folks. You'll read in my letter that I'm a gal that comes from a quintessential New England town. My husband and I, his parents, restored a farmhouse that was built in the late 1700s. My husband helped them. I watched it. It is unbelievably expensive to maintain a historic home properly. It's simply a burden that the neighborhood, the property owners should not have to bear. I don't know where I'm at with my time. I would love for any of you to ask me any questions that you have. I bring a great deal of history to the table. I love this neighborhood. I believe this neighborhood could probably be the best neighborhood in the city. I'm sorry to say that we really do need to rescind the historic district. Thank you very much. And thank you for all of your volunteer time. As a fellow volunteer from one to another, it's honorable work. And we do appreciate you and we are grateful for you. Happy holidays.
Happy holidays. Thank you for your time.
So at this time, I would ask those members of the attendees that have spoken already to lower their hands and let the remaining public that did not sign up through the website to raise their hands if they wish to speak.
Hearing none.
There's a few. So Christian Gare.
Hello, yes. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Oh, thank you. Good evening, everyone. I'll keep it brief. I just have one simple question. When the comment was made in regards to the possible ways to rescind the historical preservation, it was mentioned that 51%, that number keeps coming up. Can someone please specify if the 51% is based on homeowners that are in contributing properties, or is it 51% of all homeowners in Sailboat Bend? That is my only question. Thank you.
I believe the answer was. Go ahead.
Okay, it's 50. It's a simple majority of property owners in the district. It's a majority of the property owners in the district.
Okay, thank you very much.
So next I have Bernie Patricia, sorry.
Can everybody hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, great. My name is Bernie Patricia. And first, I'd like to thank the board, even though it took a long time and I deferred my dinner, for allowing me to speak. My wife and I have owned a property in Sailboat Bend since 2002. In fact, there are 2 cottages located at 11 Southwest 11th Avenue or 11 Southwest Palm Avenue. As the board knows, there are many areas or districts throughout the city that have historic properties. You guys know that Collihammock has a higher, I'm going to say a higher concentration of historic properties than Sailboat Bend. Idlewild, Progresso, Victoria Park. And Tim, I think you may have 1 or 2 in the beach area around your place. Throughout this area, the city of Fort Lauderdale property owners have the right and the option to choose if they want their property designated historic or not, but not in Sailboat Bend. Question, why? Why is the city singling out the property owners of Sailboat Bend? Stephanie, the first speaker, she said it very well. Discrimination. Definition of discrimination. Treating individuals unfairly because of who they are, where they come from, and what characteristic they possess. Why is the city discriminating against the property owners of Sailboat Bend? As the board knows, the Sailboat Bend Historic District was created in 1988. The boundary was first, the first boundary was First Street to the north, the river to the south, railway tracks to the east, and 11th Avenue to the west. In 1992, the historic district was revised to include the Sailboat Bend District. The city of Fort Lauderdale imposed the historic designation overlay on the entire Sailboat Bend without the approval of the property owners. The property owner Sailboat Bend District would like to have treatment and courtesy as everybody else. A couple of years ago, Commissioner Heather Morales said, the city has the responsibility to lift the neighborhood up by improving them, not holding them down. Why is the city discriminating against the property owners of Sailboat Bend? I'm asking the board to support us in eliminating the Sailboat Bend designation, the historic designation on Sailboat Bend.
Thank you.
So, Chair, that is the last speaker that has raised their hand. There's no
Okay.
more.
I understand we're not here to take a vote tonight. This is just a discussion. Is that correct, Trisha?
That's correct. That's correct.
So does anybody have any comments, any questions, any board members? Barbara. Hi, Barbara.
Hi. Thank you, everybody, for your contributions. It's been very, very instructive. But I'd like clarity on one issue, and that is, did the homeowners in Sailboat Bend contribute to establishing Sailboat Bend as a historical district or not? I'm not clear on that.
I don't understand your question. What do you mean by contribute?
Who established the historical designation of Sailboat Bend, and did the owners of property there, were they instrumental in that, or were they left out of it?
I can't answer that question.
I know you can't, but somebody can.
I'll answer that. The original designation was spurred by the community and at the community's request as part of a 1985 survey that was conducted. And then that led to the 1988 designation of a portion of the historic district that later led to the greater designation of the current boundaries of the Sailboat Bend Historic District.
Okay, because what I heard was conflicting points of view. And now I understand that it was the community itself in 1985 that wanted to establish this as an historic district. And that-
Initially, and you know, there's an entire history related to that. It is a lot of that history is within the updated survey report.
Yes.
There is a section specific to that, and then if of interest, there's the original historic designation report that the community actually prepared in 1992 as part of the existing boundaries for the historic district, and that also describes a lot of the background information.
That I have read that, and that was a source of my confusion, and that is people who voiced their opinions tonight or have spoken with us didn't seem to have that understanding.
Trisha, didn't the Deutsch buildings being built sort of spar like when they came in and built all those Deutsch buildings? Wasn't that something that the residents started getting really involved and wanted to stop some of the development to save some of the homes and all? Is that right? If my memory serves me correct.
I'm not sure when you're saying the Deutsch buildings, which ones you're talking about specifically. Is that the Village of Sailboat Bend, or is there
some of the you know, kind of like the bunker looking apartments?
Oh, okay. I understand.
Yeah. So from what I was told, because when I was here, you know, the townhomes going closer to the marina, those were, or Cooley's Hammock or whatever, those were some of the first. I was living here before those were built. And what I was told is that one of the things that inspired it was that this guy Deutsch came in and built these bunker looking places because he was sort of pissed off or whatever. And it was sort of like sticking it to this neighborhood. And so the neighborhood got more involved, and they were trying to protect some of the pioneer homes, you know, the first settler homes and yards and oak trees and everything. And so that's sort of what started it. And then some of the townhomes in the beginning that were being built were, to me, kind of like going to be the Deutsch buildings of the future, because they weren't at all with our neighborhood standings. Now it's sort of like the horses out of the barn, and I can understand. I loved what Sharon said, because at first she wasn't, I didn't understand, because she was saying how she was for it and then she was against it. But at this point, because with the fences and the problems with the homeowners, if you do make it, you know, for the people that own the historical homes and all, if we were to make it easier for them, you know, could we preserve what we have left, since we've lost so much? I don't understand when the developers and people that are on here speaking, because I know a lot of the ones that are speaking were developers, is when they're saying that they don't come in because so much development has been here and so much value has gone up in homes. So, you know, it's like when they're saying things that aren't true and it's on a meeting like this, I'm so confused. I'm sorry. I hope I'm not overstepping boundaries. I'm new on the board, but these are things that are sticking out to me since I've been in the neighborhood for so many years.
Okay.
I felt the same sense of confusion, Veronica, which is why I asked the question. So, you know, it's confusing to me because I'm relatively new too.
Well, I also agree with you, Barbara and Arthur, that it's a pity that these new residents are not told by their realtors, because when we bought our house many years ago, like almost 30 years ago, we were told over and over and over again, it comes with a lot of rules. It comes with a lot of rules. It's a historical neighborhood. And that's why we bought our house in Sailboat Bend. It's because of the rules, because we wanted to live in a neighborhood with historical homes and you know, trees and yards, and not, you know, multifamily dwellings. And there's a place for that. And so I liked when Arthur or somebody was saying, you know, or one of the people that are against the historical said that their realtor didn't tell them, and that maybe because they couldn't sell it. Well, that's true. I mean, like, I wouldn't buyer beware. And that's what they say is buyer beware. And so unfortunately it's happened, and we're in a historical neighborhood where realtors didn't let people know.
So Veronica, since you live in the district and you are on the board, how do we move this forward? I mean,
I liked what Sharon said. So, okay, I was on a meeting, and I don't know, this is new for me. So the whole sunshine rule or law.
Maybe we should ask Sharon.
Yeah.
I just want to get a sense.
Okay, so what I would like to say is that Richard, one of my first meetings was when Richard was trying to get a fence for one of his properties. Well, I drove and I saw the fence he wanted was across the street and another neighbor. And so the fence he wanted, I'm like, surely we're going to say yes to him for the fence. And we did. We all voted that he should have the fence. But I didn't say a word. I didn't speak. I voted. And I would have spoken out in favor of Richard for the fence. But it becomes like, and this is when I was, okay, I'm sorry. I don't want to talk.
I just want to move. It's late, but I want to move us forward. That's all.
I think that
I understand from. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
If you're not part of the solution, you're part of the problem. And I think that what Sharon was saying is that there could be maybe a compromise and a happy medium, so we can save the homes that we have. And, you know, if we give incentives and all, because a lot of the people, I'm Googling the people that are speaking, and a lot of them are developers or people that work for developers or realtors. And I am a person that bought in this neighborhood years ago. So where are my rights? Because, you know, and I'm sorry, I know I'm a board member, but so I'm speaking for people like me who we want to protect. I brought up the apartments that have the, this is why I've been on mute, my dog's bark. The carports that were torn down, they're gone now. So we get these, you know, 2-door garages. The garages were adorable. I mean, the carports were adorable apartments, and they had historical value. And some of the complaints were that people had their laundry in their carport. Well, don't throw the baby out with the bathwater.
So Veronica, taking this as we talked about, trying to move it forward. I'm going to go back to Trisha, since she outlined one procedure in the city in order to move it forward, which it sounds like, and Trisha can confirm this, any request has to come from the neighborhood association itself. But there's obviously a sticking point, because a number of people are saying that just basing it on property owners might not be fair. But we have to go back to what the city has right now before we know what we can change.
But that's not necessarily true, Arthur. One point there was I think 4 different options. One was that we could present and certify the question as a board.
Correct.
Right. So let's not throw that out. And then Sharon, who took the mic here and did a fantastic job speaking tonight, and we appreciate her comments sincerely, very well said on all fronts. I believe the Sailboat Bend Civic Association, with maybe one qualifier missing, being that it's not necessarily an historical nonprofit, could probably gain standing in order to bring that question forth, because they have the nonprofit status. It's been around for 30 years.
That's a legal question for our attorney.
And
I would have to see their documents and, you know, have to provide those documents to me. But as I said before, there are 4 different options that are available to rescind the district. You know, as it pertains to voting on whether or not you'd like to vote to rescind the district, that would have to occur at a regular meeting. That cannot occur tonight. Tonight's meeting was specifically to address the ordinance revision. So we wanted your comments to give us some guidance on those ordinance provisions. And so that was the intent of the meeting. But as far as voting to rescind the district, you're able to do so at any regular historic preservation board meeting. Or the other option is the city commission can motion to rescind the district, as well as the simple majority of property owners. I would have to look at the, you know, the documents for the Civic Association to see, but it has to be with a recognized interest in historic preservation.
And just to clarify, that's the initiation of an application for rescission, not to rescind automatically. It's
who-
still
To
a
rescind
process.
it would be- Who procedurally has
big
the
mistake.
jurisdiction to then make the formal determination, Trisha, to your point? If it goes in a ladder process, is, let's say presumably for a moment, it gets, whether the HPB puts it on an agenda or it comes forth from a civic association that has standing, it would then need to go to the city commission for ratification at that point? Is that what happens?
Correct. So it has to go to the Historic Preservation Board for a recommendation to the City Commission, like any other designation. It has to go, in this case, to the Planning and Zoning Board for a recommendation because it has an ordinance. And then it goes to the City Commission for 2 readings.
Okay.
So there's 4 public hearings.
Just to emphasize again, this is Shari. It would need to make sure that if you did do a motion to rescind the designation, you would need to make sure that it legally meets the criteria. So the criteria would be that it no longer meets the criteria under which it was originally designated. So let's say it was designated under 4 different criteria, then it can't meet any of those criteria anymore. So just make sure that you have a legal basis for doing so.
Sure. No, I'm certainly not implying, and nor could it be done tonight in a special set meeting, but I think upon hearing everybody, maybe I'm alone here, but the majority seem to be for rescission. That's what I heard tonight.
I think that neighbors that would want to keep it, to rescind it is, you can't undo that. And it's only going to go, in my opinion, the people that would not want it, the people like me who have lived in there, they're living their life. They're not the developers. They're not the people that are.
I take issue with that. I don't think everyone on who spoke tonight's a developer. I know some of the people personally, and
I mentioned Sharon in particular. Right. She's a resident, but I'm sorry, Gus Carbonell. Does he really? And nothing against him. He's a nice person. I'm sure he's still on here. He's great. But the people that are just they are buying property and going through loopholes for years. They've done that. So maybe we need to close some of the loopholes. We either need to make it tighter or we need to give incentives. But that's my opinion.
I agree with you in one sense, Veronica, that if the vote ends up going towards rescinding the historic district way down the line, I think the neighborhood needs to talk about what kinds of controls, if any, take their place, or do you just go with the city code?
Yes.
I mean, that's an open question.
To me, it's such a big issue that we should go door to door and knock. We should go door to door and knock, because not everybody is online.
I'm just raising the issue. This is up to the neighborhood.
No, I agree with Arthur. I've agreed with I wanted to applaud everything you said.
I have a comment, Mr. Chair.
Could I have a moment of clarification?
I'm sorry, Tim, and then Barbara.
Okay. And just try to simplify tonight, and I know we're not voting, but we have a responsibility as the board to listen to everybody. And it's been abundantly clear tonight that there's great concern for a sailboat bend and the people who live there. I personally feel that the process is flawed right from the very beginning. From the day that it was introduced, it was not handled or it was not put together for long-term success. I don't think that there will ever be.
You mean the formation,
excuse me.
You mean the formation? The day it was put together, is that what you mean, the formation?
What I mean, ma'am, is the historic preservation, the way it's written from the application process and forward is flawed. I don't think there'll ever be success until there's owner consent and funding. There's 2 things missing for this thing to be successful, is owner consent of the property and funding. We don't have either one of those in this process. And it continually comes back in front of us that people can't afford to do these fix-ups. They don't want to be designated. It's forced on them. And no matter how you want to decide it, no matter how you want to explain it, for the good of the people, well, it's not for the good of these people tonight that got up and spoke. And I am 150% here tonight in favor of historic preservation. but it has to be ethically funded and it has to have the cooperation of both sides. And I think it's until we have that, we will be going in circles with this argument. And we need to go right back to the foundation of the way this process works and move forward from there. There's a lot of work to be done. We could keep adding on to this, like somebody who puts sheds behind their house and blah, 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 blah. It's just not going to work until you get both sides to cooperate with each other and everybody wants to move forward. The last time we were here last month, we had the doctor who used to be the chair of our board and his beautiful home, and Arthur, his architect. That is a perfect example of what works. And these folks that spoke tonight, it's a perfect example of what doesn't work. Their houses are falling down. They can't afford to fix them up. They're scared to death in the neighborhood, and everybody's hating each other over this. This was not the intent of historic preservation. It's gone sideways, and it's our responsibility to bring it to the attention of our city fathers and tell them to fix it. That's it.
I would like to say two things, and that is, first of all, I know that people have bought into Sailboat Bend for a lot of reasons. From the perspective of it being a historic district and knowing it's an historic district and knowing the parameters of what that means. And there are people who have bought into it because it isn't as expensive as some of the other areas of Fort Lauderdale. And I heard tonight from people that real estate agents didn't inform them of it being an historic district and the various things that come along with that. So there's a lot of information that's been trotted out tonight that is difficult to distinguish truth from untruth. And of course, it depends on the person's perspective. But Shari, at the expense of going over this one more time, there are 4 ways you say that the district can be designated as historic. And I understand that one is from the property owners within the district. And can you clarify the other 3?
Yes. First is by the simple majority of property owners within the district. Second is by a motion of the Historic Preservation Board, and that's just to initiate the application.
Okay.
Third is by a motion of the City Commission.
Okay.
And then fourth is by a corporate resolution of a nonprofit corporation executed by an officer authorized to bind the corporation. The nonprofit corporation must be registered within the Florida Division of Corporations for a period of 5 years and have maintained a recognized interest in historic preservation for 5 years preceding the resolution.
And it is my understanding at this juncture, I'm just trying to get clarity, that it was number 1 that established this district as historic. It was the property, a simple majority of the property owners.
No, we changed the code recently. Before, the code provided that anyone who resides in the city of Fort Lauderdale could designate any property that they wanted to. So we received feedback from the community that they didn't like that. And this code revision went through the Historic Preservation Board, the Planning and Zoning Board, and the City Commission. We did it in 2019. So we made it more restrictive so that anyone couldn't designate properties. So that's why it changed. And now it's more limited to these these categories.
Okay, thank you.
So following up on what Barbara was saying, when the district was designated, which manner happened? How did it happen? Was it the neighborhood group?
According to Trisha, it was initiated by the neighborhood itself. I do not have any knowledge that it was a majority or anything like that. But I know that according to Trisha, it was initiated by the neighborhood, but I'll defer to Trisha for the specifics on that.
And we could probably ask Dave Parker when he returns.
What, can I just ask why that's so crucial to what we're facing tonight? To echo,
it's not, Richard. I was just curious.
Yeah, no, and I appreciate knowing the history as well. I'm trying to gauge,
it's a matter of gaining clarity.
Sure, no, I can appreciate that, but to Tim's point, everything is fractured right now. It seems like some of it's working,
well,
it's not.
But Richard, look, there's 4 ways if the neighborhood would like to move forward.
Right. No, and
so
that's
a decision that everyone needs to have.
Well, and if my memory